Hi, my name is Liz Schlemer, and this is a video for IME 315, Financial Decision Making for Engineers. This particular video is going to be talking about labor cost per unit. So in the 5 areas that we're covering in this class, this video falls under cost of products. When we look at this fully allocated cost model, we see that when we convert all costs to dollar per unit, we can compare that to the sales price to determine what the particular profit is. And there's 3 areas that we're interested in: overhead, material, and labor. In this video, we're going to be talking about the labor cost. And there's 2 pieces to that. The first is what's the cost to the company? So we pay an employee a certain amount, but also we have other costs associated with having an employee. Particularly, all companies have to pay payroll taxes, and we need to understand what that is. In addition, there might be some other things that a company offers their employees, like benefits or time off. The second part of the things we need to understand in order to calculate dollar per unit labor cost is we need to determine how long it takes to make the particular item. So we use stopwatch studies in this class, but there's other methods like work sampling or predetermined time standards like MTM. But we do this for each step in the process. So first of all, the first part of this video, we're going to be talking about the extra costs that are associated with having an employee beyond their particular pay. The big part of that is taxes. So even if an employee doesn't get benefits, you absolutely have to pay taxes as an employer. And there's 3 sort of areas of that: federal, state, and something called workers' comp, or workers' compensation. And it's not really a tax, but a mandate, meaning that you have to supply that for your companies, and it's supplied through insurance companies. But we need to include that as the cost to the company. So let's go ahead and look at these in some detail. The first thing we're going to talk about is federal, and there's 3 types of taxes that are paid, that are required by the federal government. The first is Social Security tax, the second is Medicare, and the third is federal unemployment tax. For states, there's 2 taxes: state unemployment tax and employee training tax. And as I go through this video, I'm going to be talking about California particularly, but other states have similar ways of calculating, but the rates might be different. And then again, workers' comp is required. You pay it to an insurance company. The more dangerous the job that an employee has, the higher the cost of the workers' compensation. And this particular tax is to compensate workers who are injured on the job, and it's a mandate by the federal government. So let's look at the federal taxes first. Social Security tax is 6.2% on the first $132,900 of income. And it's actually paid by both employee and employer. So both the employee and the employer has to pay 6.2%. And you'll see that in another video when we do a calculation of take-home pay. This video, though, we're just looking at the cost to the company. So we're only going to include the 6.2% that's paid by the employer. The next thing is Medicare, and Medicare is 1.45%, and it's paid by, again, both employee and employer, but we're only concerned in this video about the employer cost. Federal unemployment tax, this is actually a quite small amount in California because California has very good unemployment taxes. And so it's just 0.6% on the first $7,000, which is only $42. But this is employment taxes for states that do not have good unemployment insurance. So now let's look at the state taxes. State unemployment, so again, this is for California, but I guess I'm going to go backwards here. The first is the employee training tax is 0.1% on the first $7,000. So that's only $7 a year for each employee, but it needs to be included because it is a cost. There's the state unemployment in California. It varies between 1.5% and 6.2%. And that depends on what your track record is as an employer. If you've laid off people quite a bit and they had to collect unemployment, then your rate will be higher. New employers who have no track record of having an employment are charged 3.4%. So often we use that in these calculations. And again, it's only on the first $7,000 of wages for each employee. And again, the workers' comp is a mandated insurance. It depends. It ranges from manufacturing of 9%, logging of 35%. There's even lower rates, like 3% if it's an office job. So it very much depends on the danger of the job that you are insuring. So let's go through a calculation for one particular individual who's making $75,000 a year. So this might be what you make when you graduate. And so we're going to look at, the company says they'll pay you $75,000, but how much will that actually cost them to have you as an employee? So the first thing I'm going to add to that is Social Security tax. It's 6.2% on the first $132,000. You make less than $132,000, so it'll just be 6.2 or $46.50. Medicare is 1.45%, which is $1,087. Federal unemployment, which is FUTA, is 0.6 on the first $7,000, so that's $42. State unemployment is 3.4%. Is what I'm assuming here on the first $7,000, so that's $238. Employment trading tax is 0.1 on $7,000, which is only $7. A workers' comp, I'm going to assume that you're like a manufacturing engineer, and so it'll cost about 9%, which is $67.50. So if we add all that up, that means the cost to the company is $87,000, $87,774, compared to what they're paying you, which is $75,000. So you can see the cost of the company in only taxes is actually quite a bit more. Now, when we do this calculation for all employees, I suggest that we ignore the cutoffs and we just use the percentages. So what I've done here is I took all those percentages and added them up, and then therefore the cost of the company is total cost of the company is 20.75% over the particular salary that you have to pay. So that means that if you're paying a salary, that you have to add almost 21% over that salary just to pay the taxes. Now, there's other benefits, like when you get hired as an engineer, they will provide medical benefits, they'll provide time off, possibly educational benefits. There's also subsidized childcare, things like that, life insurance. There's a lot of things companies offer. And it's not uncommon for this to be like the benefits to be 25% of your salary. So not only do your taxes is 20.75%, but your benefits are 25%. In addition, they have overhead costs. So if you think about what they have to provide you as an employee, is they provide you an office space, equipment, they provide you all the building, so everything associated with you working, and it's not uncommon for that to be another 25%. So we can imagine that between your salary plus up to 100% is actually the cost to the company. So if you get paid $75,000, it could cost the company up to $150,000. So thinking about cost of the company is important. When we do these calculations, the only thing we're going to include is the taxes, because all the other things are a little bit, are not often included in the calculations for companies, and some companies don't give benefits, so we'll just use the tax value. So again, we're looking at this now. We've figured out how much this is going to cost an employer per dollar per hour. So on top of the salary that you paid, you also have $1 per hour cost. So now we're going to talk about how long does it take to do this. And we're going to go through a very quick example of time studies. If you're an industrial engineer, you've probably already seen this in IME 223. But if you're not, this is just a quick overview of what a time study is, a stopwatch time study. So the steps we're going to go through is we decide what what operation to study. So we need to make sure it's an experienced operator and they're using good methods. So they're not like being silly about what they're doing. They're actually a very good operator. And then the next thing is we divide this into elements, or what are the steps we're going to time. So we can't time things that are too short and too long. So we have to define what is it that we're going to define, how we're going to break up the timing into steps, and that's called elements. And then we time the operators for several times, and we call that observed times. And usually you do between 5 or 10 cycles to try to get a good range of values. Then you rate the operator. A typical operator works at 100. A fast operator can work as much as 120. A slow operator can work at as much as 80. So this is to adjust from an atypical operator to a typical operator. And then we calculate normal time, which is the observed time times the rating divided by 100. That's how we get normal time. And then we add to it allowances. So there's allowances that are usually around 10 to 25%. And again, it depends on how complicated the job is and how tiring it is. And so we then take the standard time, which is normal time, times 1 plus the allowance rate. So I'll go through a little example here. So we have a time study sheet here where I've defined these 4 elements: task A, task B, task C and D, and task E. And I'm going to observe them 5 times and then watch and decide on a rating, and then calculate normal time and standard time. So I've gone through and I've observed them, and I have these values in here. I also rated them. So in these particular tasks, how fast do I think this operator is? And then I calculate the average observed time. I convert that into normal time by applying the rating. And then I add to it allowance. In this case, I added a 25% allowance to get 5.77 minutes in order to do this task. So that's a simple time study. We'll just use that in our next calculation. So given the time study in the previous slide, where the standard time to make an object is 5.77 minutes per unit, and the worker gets paid $15 an hour, calculate the cost of the company on a per unit basis. So what I'm just going to do is take 577. I need to convert that to hours because the hourly rate of $15 is what this person makes. And then I multiply that by 1.2075, where 20.75 is the percent associated with payroll taxes. And that will get us a cost to produce this item at $1.74. Now, let's say if the worker makes an error about 7% of the time, or 7% of the time it's scrap, which means it's not going to be good parts. So we use the same kind of calculation we do with material costs, which I'm going to talk about later, and we divide that by 1 minus the scrap rate. So we take the 577 minutes, convert it to hours by dividing by 60, multiply by $15 an hour, add to the tax rate by multiplying by 1.2075, and then divide by 1 minus the scrap rate, 1 minus 7%. And that gives us a unit cost of $1.873. Now, if we go back to the previous one, it used to be $1.742. This one is $1.873. You can see the cost went up because the scrap, or the quality, went down. So that's a simple look at how to calculate labor cost. And again, this particular video has to do with costs of product.